This video will cover waterproofing electronics for battleships. I'll show a few of the common methods to waterproof electronics and kind of cover the advantages and disadvantages of each. The first main one will be potting electronics in epoxy. So this right here is a speed control for a brushless motor. I use this for pump. So this right here is kind of like the finished product, and then this is what it looks like when you get it from Hobby King. So you can see they put a kind of a heat shrink around it that we'll have to cut off. What I use for potting is I'll print up little potting forms with a 3D printer. If you don't have a 3D printer, you can just make a little box, or I've used wax paper in a box as the form, or I've seen some people use tape before. But since I have a 3D printer, it's really easy to get the exact size you want and the dimensions you want. I'll also be potting this gun board here, this little circuit board, and then similarly I have a little potting form that I printed up to use. So I use epoxy to do this. Epoxy works pretty well. It's waterproof. So the goal is to kind of, protect all the little electronic components on the circuit boards. The wires themselves are usually fine. But if you got water on this board, it would short something out, or it would corrode and it would fail pretty quickly. Another method that I'll show what I use for this receiver is coating it in E6000. So E6000 is an adhesive, but it actually works really well at this purpose. So this is a little receiver, and you coat it with E6000. When you put it on, it looks all, there's a lot more kind of volume on here, but then it kind of dries. It'll drip off, and it'll dries this nice like thin layer over all the parts of the circuit board. And this works pretty well. You can leave this receiver just in the boat. Okay, so to do the potting, for this, I'll start out by cutting off the heat shrink here, and then you can see here I have a hole that I'll use this kind of metal plate as like a heat sink, which comes with this. So sometimes I'll glue this in beforehand with E6000, but in this case, because I haven't done that yet, I'll just tape it in the bottom. And then this board, the gun board here, it's all wired up. I could test it before I pot it, because once you pot it, it's kind of you only get one shot. If you mess it up, there's pretty much no way to remove the epoxy. So I could test it. I don't know if I will or not. But having the potting form printed makes it really easy, where I'll just put epoxy in here and then stick the board in and let it dry. Here's the ESC with the heat shrink removed. So this one has two heat sinks. It's got the red one, and it's got the just the plain piece of aluminum there. The heat sinks are attached with kind of this. It's like a thin layer of stuff that kind of insulates, I think, and probably helps conduct heat. Sometimes the heat sinks will fall off because the that little thin gray layer you see there. Sometimes that'll fall off. It's not really a big deal. But this one, I'll pull this bottom plate off, the just stock aluminum one, so I can tape it into the form, because I want to kind of like cover the whole bottom. You know, I'll get that in. That'll make a sealed surface, and then when I put epoxy in it, that'll make sure I kind of seal up the all of the little, you know, components on the board there. I have the bottom plate removed and taped onto the potting form. I used a little bit of CA glue to just hold it in place so it's not free floating. Here you can see the bottom of the ESC. There's that grade material I was kind of talking about. So you can see they used hot glue to kind of form a bridge between, you know, this component, so the plate will sit level. So big things you want to look out for is just make sure when you put this down on the plate, you're not going to be shorting out any of these electrical connections, either the three phases or the positive negative in. But this one, because of the super glue or the hot glue, it should be fine. So that's pretty much all set. So I'll just I'll stage a bunch of these. I have 3 or 4 to do, and mix up some epoxy and get it done. Just about set to do the epoxy job. So I got my components all staged. This guy right here is a Hulolu board. You can use this for either turning on and off a brushed pump, or if you have a single gun you need to fire, or turn off lights. So that potting container is slightly smaller. Then I have these two. Those are gun boards. Single input, double output. I got the receiver here. I'm going to do a different method with this receiver. I'm actually going to pot it in this little rectangle thing here. So I made up all these leads because I'm using these 3-pronged XT30 connectors. So I bound the receiver, I tested it out, it works fine. And then I got all the leads in. And then finally I have the pump ESC pretty much ready to go. So what I'll do is I'll mix up some epoxy. I'll use West Systems, and then I'll sequentially, one by one, get them done. I got this roll of tape here to help kind of support the ends of these leads, so the board will sit in the bottom, and then I have some helping hands if necessary, and then the receiver I'll end up standing up. This guy should be fine. You want your surface to be roughly level, so when the epoxy dries it'll be level. You want to make sure you're using slow cure epoxy for this, so something that cures in like 6 hours, 8 hours. The reason you do that is because epoxy is an exothermic reaction when it hardens, so it gives off a lot of heat. So if you use like 5-minute epoxy or like 1-hour epoxy, it can get really hot and it can actually melt the solder on some of these boards. So you definitely want to use a higher quality slow cure like West Systems, or you could have some US Composites slow cure back there, but the batch size on that is a lot bigger than I need, so I'll just use the West Systems for this one. Okay, I got the epoxy mixed up. So I usually start by taking whatever the component is out, and then just kind of just like filling this, getting at least the whole bottom surface wetted. Just kind of like brush it out on the sides there. You don't want to put too much because you are putting, you know, a solid in there, so you don't want it to overflow. Should be good. Take my gum board and just kind of stick it in there. Okay, and now I'll kind of put some over the top. Try not to get too much on the wires. You want to make sure it gets kind of all the way around the wires. That's about it for that one. I'll just repeat the process. Do want to try to make sure the board is staying level. If you get any bubbles, try to do the receiver. I'm probably going to fill this up a good portion of the way. Okay. As I pushed it in, I saw the epoxy kind of come up towards the top, so it's good. Now I'll just kind of hold some of the wires back so I can get more in there. Okay, it's all filled up. Try to keep the wires kind of in order, but really not too worried about it. Now for the ESC. Should be good right there. And then I'll kind of hold the control wire so it stays straight. It goes like this. Looks pretty good. Okay, so pretty much done. One thing on the speed control, you just want to make sure it's not, because of the angle of the wires, you want to make sure the thing isn't kind of lifting up. Make sure the boards are relatively level. And then just let it dry overnight. Sometimes I'll try to like straighten the wires out so they're leaving straight, so they're not off at an angle, because they'll kind of stay that way. Another waterproofing technique is using conformal coating. This stuff was used for kind of a brief period of time. It's kind of fallen out of use with the prevalence of E6000. But this stuff, you just, it comes in this little glass jar, and you just kind of coat the circuit board. So I'm going to do it on this servo, because another servo I had right here had some water intrusion and got all corroded and stopped working. So I figure I'll coat the board, and then I'll use some E6000 to hopefully seal the servo up better. Something that's nice about this is it dries pretty quickly. You should put a couple coats of it on and get it on Amazon, or just search for it online. The last waterproofing method I'll show is coating a receiver with E6000. We found E6000 works really well at preserving electronics. It's pretty easy to apply. Here's an example of a receiver that's been coated with E6000. It's probably at least 6 years old. I have not had one of these fail, despite sinking many times. You can see that the E6000 forms a film over the circuit components of a receiver. This can also be used for gun boards or speed controls. So to do this, the first step, specifically for a receiver, but the same applies to like a gun board or something, is to remove the casing around the circuit board. You want the circuit board exposed. So this one, there was a little film around it, which has the channels labeled, which is nice, so maybe don't throw this out, keep it as a reference, but it's easier to apply the E6000 with this removed. Other receivers come with a little case with screws, so those can be removed pretty easily. Basic approach for this, I will usually put a servo lead in one of the end pins. This allows me to hold it much easier, and then I'll really just hope to cover the entire circuit board area with E6000, doing a kind of like a lawnmower pattern, just going back and forth. One complicating factor on this board is you can see there's two boards there and a gap, so I'm just going to make sure that gap is completely filled and let the E6000 kind of sort its way out. I want to make sure I don't get it on the actual pins, so I'll go up to between the black part there and the board to the right, so I'll go up to that point, because it's really just pins there. There's no circuit board components downstream of that. I usually just do one side, then the edges, and the other side I'll put a little bit onto the wires, and then the E6000 will drip off, so I'll use helping hands or something so I can set it up and let it dry. E6000 does take several hours to dry, but it is generally pretty quick. I'll just do a quick demo here. I like to use the clear, and then I like to use this size, so it's 2 fluid ounces, because this tip is works better than a wider tip for this application. So I'll just kind of get started here. Get the top covered there. And I'll do one side. And then for this, I'm just gonna kind of squeeze it between them. Most receivers only have a single board, so you don't need to do this thing to get it between both of them. You can kind of see it coming out the end there. So now I'll do this end. Okay, and now I'll do the underside. Once I get it on here, I want to make sure I have it inclined away from the pins, so as it drips down, it doesn't get on the pins. Just go out on the wires a little bit. And then I'll do a kind of quick check to make sure I got everything covered. That looks good. That looks good. Top looks good. Put a little more around the black part. Okay. Now set it up vertically, and you can see it flowing off. So this will drip off for a bit. You do lose some excess, but the outcome is certainly worth it. And then I'll let this dry, and then once it dries, I'll trim off any significant drips. So it'll end up looking, something like this in terms of just having a nice, very thin film. And then that's about it. So I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching.